There are moments in every person's life when they face intense adversity. They're crucibles that forge who they become as individuals and as leaders. Now more than ever, we need leaders who are called to a higher standard, focused on leaving it better than they found it, and paying it forward to the next generations. Now, let's join Fire Chief Randy Brugman as he speaks with leaders from all walks of life, as he explores and learns from their personal journeys and the crucibles that have forged them into better leaders and better people.
Hi, welcome to the next episode of the Leadership Crucible podcast. Today it's my honor and pleasure to have Blake Wade on the show. Blake currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the Native American Cultural and Educational Authority since his appointment on December 1st of 2011. The NACEA is the Oklahoma State agency responsible for building and developing the American Indian Cultural Center and Museum. Prior to assuming this appointment, Wade was president of Oklahoma's Business Roundtable, the primary economic development support organization providing critical private funding in support of the economic development efforts of the governor, lieutenant governor, and the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. Wade served as the executive director of the Oklahoma Historical Society from 1990 to 1999 and the director of the Oklahoma Capitol Complex and Centennial Commemorative Commission beginning August 1st, 1999. He was responsible for overseeing preparation for Oklahoma's Centennial Commemoration of statehood in 2007. Blake also served in the U.S. Army, and while a major in the U.S. Army, he received 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Vietnam Service Medals, and the Vietnam Cross of Gallantry. A Lawton native, Wade graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a BA in journalism and was a graduate of the Command and General Staff College. Wade participates actively in community organizations, serving on the board of directors for the State Fair, the campaign for the Arcadia Trails Treatment Center that opened in May of 2019, Boy Scouts of America, First Step, and Metro Alliance, director of the USS Oklahoma Memorial at Pearl Harbor, Friends of the Governor's Mansion, the Jim Thorpe Association, Hall of Fame Metro Alliance, and Jasmine Moran Children's Museum. He is the recipient of the 2008 Administrator of the Year Award and receiver of an Emmy Award for the production of Oklahoma Centennial's spectacular Fort Center, November 16, 2007. Well, Blake, welcome to the Leadership Crucible podcast. It's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you to be here. I'm honored.
Well, your life's work is pretty inspirational, and we're going to explore a little bit about that today. But, you know, I know you've faced several situations in your life that have really kind of helped shape who you've become, and wondered if you could share a couple of those.
Well, that's, you got me thinking back on my life, and certainly comes to my mind one of the situations that I really have never talked about any time is that I had polio when I was 3 years of age. It's interesting, being a baby boomer. My mother and I lived with my grandparents because my dad that I had never seen went off to World War II, and I was 3 years of age when I got a knock on the door at my grandmother's house, and my grandmother said, "Go open the door, Blake." And I went to the door, and there was this strange man that was there, and he said, "Blake," and I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm your father." I bring that up because that probably after 3 years of my beginning life and not ever knowing who Dad was, I had all the love I could from my grandmother and my mother and my grandfather. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes into my life that I've got to get to know, and that played a giant role to this day. That little did I ever know how significant that would be, because I never had the feeling that my dad and I were real close. He was a practicing alcoholic. And of course, I just could not stand that in my early part of my life. That's one that comes to my play. And then, of course, going on in life, going into the military, and then, of course, Vietnam. At the age of 21, 22 years of age, I'm really serious about this today more than ever. I took that for granted back in the day that, when your country calls you, you serve and you don't ever question. But today I'm deeply concerned about these young men and women who have had to go off to war or conflicts. May you take that in consideration. I'm dealing with that a lot today in my association, United States Army, dealing with the not kids, they're men and women that deserve much, much more. And so I've had to reflect back on, well, what did Vietnam do to me? Well, it did certain things. One is it crossed the invisible line in my drinking to I started drinking heavily over there. And bottom line was that Vietnam played a big, giant role in my future. I had a beautiful career in the military, but I didn't realize how sensitive it was until my latter years. In these years I'm in now, helping these young people in Iraq and in Afghanistan and all that are coming back, and they're having to deal with their wives leaving them. And I remember that because I too got a divorce back in the Vietnamese days. And, I don't blame anybody in that, because once you've been into war, you do change. And that was my most significant second time of my life. And again, then my recovery from alcoholism was the number one. And 1 September 1983 of my sobriety date, of which I now have 39 years of sobriety. So coupled with all those things, one that comes to my mind is a doctor told me one time, Blake, you've got manic depression and alcoholism. And it is a very true statement. And I want anybody out there to know that if you can quit drinking, then you will not be manic depressed. But the two just tied together. When you've been drinking a lot, you get depressed, and the doctors felt like that was, they couldn't put two and two together. But when the day that I quit drinking, 1 September of 83, I've never been depressed since then. So I've just had to say that out loud. And those are times that have been vital as I look back on my life. So back in those days, I picked up one line that I've still got on my desk, and it must say this, is that Harry Truman said, "It is amazing how much you can accomplish when it doesn't matter who gets the credit." And man, has that been a true statement for me ever since then on all my projects that I've done. As I mentioned to you, once I got to that business of recovery and starting my whole life over, my first project was, of course, putting the racetrack into Oklahoma City. And I kept saying to myself, Blake, if you can not drink anymore, you have got a chance to live a great life. There was a banker here in Oklahoma City at the time that I called to find out what he thought I ought to do with my life. And he said, if I could do it all over again, I would be of service to Oklahoma. And I thought, wow, that's different. I've never thought about that. But that's what happened to me. I came back from Presidio, San Francisco, and my first job was the DeBarlos had the 49ers out there, but they were wanting to put in the racetrack here in Oklahoma City. So I tied up into that, and, I just started proving that I can do things without alcohol. And so that was really, my most important goal was, please help me stay sober so that I can complete a job that I need to do in order to feel better about myself. And that happened. It got me started on my recovery program.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about the recovery center that you started for people who are struggling with addictions?
Absolutely, Randy. After a period of time, one of the greatest things in recovery is being of service, as I mentioned to these new young soldiers that are coming back now that are having all those tragedies that I certainly went through in my period of Vietnam. Is that I found out that Oklahoma did not have a place, and I'm going to use this as a specific example. I started at the Betty Ford Center, and I wanted them to come and move to Oklahoma. And I got them somewhat, but it just didn't work back in those days of the 80s and 90s. But what I did start was the First Step program, which is made up of 100 men that live out at a lake environment, and they sign up for 1 year. And we do not charge them a penny. We get them going, we get them a job, we get them sober. But the key to the game is they have to stay with me a whole year. And if a person stays that whole year, then they're on their way to recovery. Let me just clarify though, I'd say 40% of those drop out during that year period of time. So I know who the ones that are just there to get off the hook of their family or wives or jobs or whatever. But these 60% have proven to me how well they've recovered. We also did a 50 ladies program that's also out by a lake. And that is the same thing. They can bring their children. And where I play a role in this is the financial part of raising the funds in order to happen. This all came about, and I can remember it well, a very wealthy family in Oklahoma called me and said, Blake, what do I do? I sent my kids to Betty Ford. I've sent them to Hazleton. I've sent them to the doctor's program out in Atlanta, and they still don't get sober. It's cost me $300,000. And I said, once you do all those things, you come and see me, and we put them out here, and we find out if they really, really want to get sober. And that has been the key to my kingdom is, okay, I've got to raise the money, but it's so important that when they get down to the absolute bottom and their parents are now saying, we're not going to provide you any more funds, then I'm finding out then is when they get a chance to help themselves. And that has been my key on that. And I'm so glad we did. And now we help raise the money for a treatment center in a hospital area here in Oklahoma City that is second to none. I have Betty Ford and Hazleton joining together to run it. And it is a marvelous program that we needed in the Midwest, like Betty Ford out on the West Coast. Now we've got one in the Midwest in Texas, Kansas, Missouri, and all these states are coming here and bringing their people here. And, they have to pay, but it's another alternative for getting recovery.
Well, that's a great piece of work, and I know that you've are very, very active with the Recovery Center every day. And so what are you seeing from just a general population standpoint with the problem with addiction and alcoholism? Is it increased?
It's coming big.
Yeah.
Randy, it's. I wish I could say it's getting less. It's getting more. I also am now tied, of course, to the casinos of the 39 Indian tribes that I represent right now, and I'm asking my chiefs and my governors, anything we do with casinos, you've got to promise me we have an addiction solution to recovery from gambling. It's just another area that I did not ever realize, how it is that you can take your family's milk money and go out to a casino and lose it all and then start drinking to boot, and then you end up being divorced, and it just goes on and on.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad road, isn't it?
It is a bad road, and it's not getting any better. I see these kids, taking these straight shots and all that. And, My God, I see them coming in younger because of the drugs. I attend 5 meetings a week still. In every one of these meetings, there's 25 to 30, 22 to 30-year-old people that are in there, and I can see that it's just getting bigger and quicker, and these drugs make you come in earlier, and so it's going to be a problem. It always has been.
Yeah, and I think the opioid and fentanyl issue that we're dealing with and have been dealing with for the last decade it's incredibly difficult to address.
Randy, in the last 5 years on that fentanyl, I've lost 21 people to that fentanyl. That it's just so instant that they just don't even realize how powerful that is.
Yeah. As a former first responder, we have had our personnel exposed to that, and if you don't have the Narcan available immediately, it's very, very dangerous. So yeah, I totally agree. You touched a little bit earlier on your service to our country, and thank you for that. You were a major in the Army, and can you share a little bit about that part of your life and about the leadership lessons that you've learned in that role?
Thank you. I go back to being very honest about it. I went to the University of Oklahoma. Back in those days, it was mandatory to go to ROTC, and I was never planning on being a military man whatsoever, but I didn't want to go in as a private either. So I took the easier route out and went to ROTC, became a second lieutenant, and thought I'd serve 2 years. And all of a sudden, I got assigned to my first assignment was to Italy. And back in those days in 1967, it's interesting for me to say this, is that because all of the ranking military people were over in Vietnam as a lieutenant, I became a company commander over in Italy. And that started my life on a kind of a grown-up deal. But what I do remember over there was that 50 years later, I took my present wife over to Italy, and they let me into Camp Darby where I was stationed, went to that same barracks that I had 200 troops at that time, and walked in there, and they had all the pictures of company commanders going back to 1948. And lo and behold, I saw my picture 50 years ago as a lieutenant. And I just said, look at there. That's how young I was back in those days. But then I got to go to Vietnam, and it was not an easy time for me. I became an aide-de-camp to a general later on after serving out in the boondocks. And that was another traumatic experience for me, is to see, and I want to tell this story because the general and I he took me to a place over where the hospitals were, and we went into a bay area of 100 men that were trying to come off of opiates. And over in Vietnam, they were everywhere. And I walked in there, Randy, and all I could hear to this day was the screaming of the withdrawals of trying to come off these drugs because they were not going to allow them to come back to the United States until they were off of them. This was another example of what I was to face on my recovery, and that was, if you continue to drink and use, you will eventually get to a point of depression, suicidal, and that. And boy, did that ring a bell with me on that one. Leadership came very much from that time period of you treat people right and they're going to treat you right. And that was certainly the way that as a company commander is what I learned. As a aide to a general, it was more so to help him understand what the younger people were going through and the disasters that were happening in Vietnam on not winning the war. And I can go on and on about that. But, being a personnel person, of helping and caring about people. It will be what I believe is, if there's a leadership quality that I have, is I care so much about the human beings. I care about your well-being. I understand. I had a lieutenant under me over there that went back R&R, and his wife was, of course, messing around, and he came back and he put a gun to his head, and I'll never forget, what did I do wrong? What could I have done? And those were the moral things that I just was having so much trouble with. And I'll end this war period in this way. When it was time for me to come back to the United States, I had about 5 or 6 of my African Americans with me that served underneath me. And I had them with me all the way to Travis Air Base in California, when we were told not to wear uniforms, that they would be rebelling and protesting outside of the gates, that we were ever there, and for us to take off our fatigues, the uniforms we had on for Vietnam, and to quietly get out of San Francisco as quickly as possible. Well, Randy, back in those days, I thought that we were all there to support the United States of America. And how could this be so wrong with what was happening within our own country? And I can give you an example. I took my men down to San Francisco because we were leaving the next day to go to everywhere else in the world. And the hotel would not allow my 5 men, African Americans, to go into the hotel with me. And I put them in my room and we slept on the floor. I tell that as a brutal story that I'll remember for all my life. Here I was, a comrade with these men. These men were my men, and they lived through that. We lost a lot of them, but I could not believe that they could be so rude to think that I was not going to take care of them. And that still rings a real strong part of my life.
Yeah, it was a really difficult time for our country, and I'm pleased in one respect that we finally honored the sacrifice and the effort that our Vietnam vets have put in on behalf of the United States, and again, thank you for that.
I feel that same thing. With the Associated United States Army, I have to go up to Walter Reed with the young men that have lost amputees and all legs and arms and all that stuff. I couldn't do it for the first couple of times, but I've since grown to know that if I'm going to help anybody, I've got to help these Oklahomans that are in distress, and that I don't feel a lot of people really understand or care about these people. So, I just take it real seriously. And quite honestly, I shouldn't even be talking about it right now, but I for some reason want to.
Well, I appreciate that. You've run a lot of large organizations throughout your life, and what challenges do you find yourself repeatedly having to deal with when you move organizations forward?
When you got people, you got problems, Randy. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at how human beings, always, want to take advantage of their bosses or whatever. I guess I'm an easy push because, I really care about their concerns at home, their kids, their wives, etc. And so, that's probably one of the biggest areas of my concern. I go in there and let me give you an example. It was with the Oklahoma Historical Society. I'd finished the racetrack. The governor of the state of Oklahoma wanted me to come out and talk about the Oklahoma Historical Society. I told the governor, I said, Governor, I'll be honest with you, I do not have a PhD in history. And so I'm going to be saying, I'm a layman in this area. He said, it's all dealing with management of the people over there. They had 65 PhDs in this historical society business. So what I did was I met with them and I said, let me just share with you what I would like to suggest. And that is, you all keep doing your jobs. that you're doing such a marvelous job of documenting the history of our great state. But what I don't think you're doing is letting the people, the laymen of Oklahoma, know what you're doing. And I think that's my job, is to make sure that the state of Oklahoma knows what great jobs you all are doing and what areas you're doing. And when you do a paper or whatever, let me get the word out. And so we went from a closed PhD academic area of 780 members to over 17,000 people. And that was strictly because I think people wanted to know about our history, but never did get the chance because the academias did not want really to get, to spread the word, if I may. But we got along great. We had a wonderful time, got a new history center, $80 million history center out of it. And so I'm real happy about that period of my time.
Well, congratulations on that. And sometimes we get really myopic in our professional lives and focused on what we're doing day to day, and we forget to tell people all the good work we're doing. So,
Randy, that's exactly what the situation at the Historical Society was. They just didn't know that they should be out telling people.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the foundation of a really good leader?
Well, one, could not use drugs and alcohol. That's one of the things. I also know that you've got to have your act together in order to be able to pass it on. And an area that I am remiss in as I've ever been in my life was when I lost my wife and my two kids to the disease of alcoholism, and I've tried to make up for the last 40 years to them for that time period that they had to live with me and all that. So I say to you, when I look back or when I'm hiring somebody, I got to know that they care. I got to know that they really are in here not for money, but to make a difference, to be of service. That man was not wrong when he said to me, be of service to Oklahoma. And if I can get people to believe in that and to realize what old Harry said about, how much you can get accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit. But Randy, that's a giant problem in life is I see so many people that are just so heavily into for the I part of it instead of the we part of it. And when I can get them to understand that the job can get done, but don't think that you have to take the credit for it. It'll get done if we don't do that.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's been my answer all the way.
Yeah. Well, that's part of this this process that we're doing with the Leadership Crucible. Is that it's two foundational elements: is to pay it forward and leave it better than you found it, and you do that through investing in your people.
That's it. You're nailing it. I'm so glad you guys are spreading that word because, at this time in our lives, politically, spiritually, we've got to really pay attention to this because, I was scared to death we were going to lose democracy in the last year or two. So, it scared me, and so I hope that we can get it all together and be together again. That would be, if anything in the world I don't want is for us all to get divided and start fighting each other.
Yeah, the political polarization that I think that we've experienced, and I mean, the last 10 years is in my job as fire chief, I saw that at the local level. It just continued to split and split and split. And the factions on local government was just, it wasn't about the services that we should be providing. It was about who was going to win politically. And when it gets to being who's going to win politically and you forget about the service, that's when we get into trouble.
And Randy, I can't go any further without saying that my summer months in high school at a little private Catholic school I went to, I was offered a job at the main fire station in Lawton, Oklahoma, where I got to spend all summer, every other day, 24 on, 24 off, working for the fire station. It was my most memorable, wonderful time of my life. You talk about a leadership deal. that was probably my start. Think about being a sophomore, junior in high school, and to be able to get a summer job at a fire station and going out on those fire trucks and doing hoses. I mean, I learned more from those guys than I'll ever forget. And to this day, love to go by that same main fire station and say hello and have one of the best lunches I've ever had in my life. So I just had to get. Yeah, that was really. I don't ever talk about that, but it was wonderful.
Well, there's a lot of great leaders in the fire and emergency services, and I'm glad you got to
You
experience
got
a
it.
little bit about that.
They were there for me and helped me with my leadership too.
That's good. So, what advice would you give to the next generation in respect to making a difference in their life journey?
Oh golly, that's such a. I want to be honest right now. I don't know if I can go through it again with all the trials and tribulations that are going on. One thing I think I believe in, and I'm going to say it out loud, is that I'm not so sure every man and every young man and woman, especially today with women coming in the military. I didn't have the women in the military when I was there, except for nurses at the hospitals. Is the business of oh golly, I don't know what I want to say is one, be real aware of your situations with if you are going in the military. What I wanted to do is say that I'd love for every 18 to 19-year-old person needs to do some kind of service to their country, whether that be join the military or just a local group or whatever, just to kind of give back. I don't see that happening as much as I'd like to. That, giving 2 years of your life for your country is not that bad of a deal. In fact, I think you can learn a heck of a lot compared to these young men and women that come into my office right now. They want a $100,000 a year job, and they don't like the 8 to 5.
Yeah.
Now I have trouble, Randy, with sitting down and chatting about that when in fact, that was a part of responsibility, being on time, caring. Those are the things that I would like a young man and woman to at least consider. The thought is, you got your whole life to get out there and find a profession. But what about this little deal of giving back to your country?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think Israel does that, don't they? They require a two-year commitment of some type of service to their country, and I think when you do that at a young age, it helps to kind of build a foundational element for the rest of your life because it helps you to get perspective.
And nothing wrong with the police force, the firemen, and all of these areas you can fit into whatever desires or whatever you would like to learn about. And certainly there are plenty of opportunities, but I don't know if I feel that. I seem like the young people are right now. They're really, really wanting to get out and make a fortune, and that worries me.
Yeah, well, I think some of them are, but I've talked to several that are just coming out of high school, and I think they also have a commitment to service, and I think they just need an avenue to potentially do that. And I think we could create that avenue nationally to help them to facilitate being able to plug into that.
Randy, you seem to be perfect for that role.
Well, yeah. Well, that's a whole nother discussion. Last question for you, Blake, is what are 4 or 5 takeaways that you would like to leave with the audience today that may help them to become a better person as they move through their life and a better leader in whatever they're doing?
Well, I have a picture over here on my desk over here of General Patton, and I studied a great deal of military tactics from my elders, my guys that served in World War II, like that dad that I didn't know until I was 3 years of age. For young people today, I wish they would maybe take a moment to kind of think about their own dad and mother and what all the sacrifices they've had to do in order to help. And many people maybe didn't have a dad and mother. These situations to me are so sensitive and so important that each individual needs to have that time and to kind of overlook their situation and to see, what they can do to be a better person. The whole world is so exciting to me today that they have these opportunities. But as we talked about earlier, but let's don't forget, how lucky we are in this country, and just watch Ukraine and what's happening there.
We'll make that happen. Thank you, Blake, so much.
The terrible
happy holidays
problems with war is just. I just don't think our younger people understand, how tough and difficult it is to go into these conflicts. So I say in a simple way that I just wish them the very best and wish that they would listen to your podcast and get some guidance and direction in life. And maybe one of them is just be of service to their local area, to their family, and to their state, and to their country.
Yeah, I think that's well stated, and I would add one thing. I think that, no matter what track you take in your life, there's a level of personal accountability that you have to bring to the table to be successful. And without personal accountability,
Amen.
You're not going to be successful, whatever you do.
Randy, you nailed it. I sponsor right now about 6 good, solid, 2 doctors, a lawyer, and some people on the street. And I can say to you today that the most enjoyable time of my life is being of help to another human being.
Yeah, totally agree. So, well, Blake, thank you so much for being with me today. It's just been an honor to get to know you and to meet you, and I hope sometime we can do that in person, and hopefully very, very soon.
It'd be an honor to have you come to Oklahoma, Randy. I feel like I already know you, and I hope that we can get together someday.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Crucible podcast. If you have a story of adversity you'd like to share, we'd love to hear it. Join us next time as we continue to explore how to live lives of success and significance.